Hello YouTube, this is Galway Yu-Gi-Oh here with a brand new deck profile, and in the last video I brought you Hat, which was quite an old meta deck which had kind of fell out of popularity, and I kind of did an updated version. You know, I featured Demise, I featured Strikes, and made the deck as good as I could make it for the current metagame. However, this time I'm bringing you Ritual Beasts, which is a much newer deck which has not topped in a very long time, at least not often. It might have topped a regional here or there, but outside of that, this deck kind of disappeared into nothing, because about a year ago it was doing quite well, topping quite a lot of events, and did quite good at the North American World Championship qualifier. I believe a player called Miguel Soto, if I recall correctly, and I could be wrong about that, actually took it to Worlds, which is fantastic. So yeah, I figured I'd do an updated profile for this deck. If you don't know how this deck works, just a basic overview is it just makes this card. This card's at 1, and that's the reason it kind of fell out of popularity, because with only one copy of this card, the deck is a lot more fragile. And this card just is pretty much a searcher, and it can search up to 4 or 5 cards per turn with the loops it can make, and that's why it's super strong. So this deck can still make all of those loops with the one copy. However, if that one copy is gone, you kind of lose the duel. So you do have a lose condition with this deck rather than a win condition. Although you could say resolving Ulti Cannahawk 4 or 5 times a turn is a win condition. I certainly believe it is, but without going on too much, let's get into the deck profile. First up, we've got our 3 Elder. Elder is a Tamer. You run 6 Tamers, and Tamers go with Spiritual Beasts to make the Ulti Ritual Beast monsters. This one is probably the best one. It doesn't activate, so it can't be Veilered or Breakthrough or Fiendish Chained or Striked or any of that thing. It sets a condition when it's summoned, you get an extra normal summon of a Ritual Beast monster. This means you get one of your Spiritual Beasts onto the field and you can start fusing away. The reason you run this card at 3 is because it only needs a card in your hand to work with, whereas the other ones need cards in your Banished Zone or Grave, which in turn 1 is quite hard to do. Next up we have our one of Lara, and one of Zephyr and Pilica, and also one of Wen. So I wanted to keep one of each because you need different names to search more than once per turn. The Ritual Beast monsters all have the condition that they can only be special summoned once per turn, and so you can't loop them indefinitely. But for each copy of, or for each different Ritual Beast Tamer you have, you get an extra search with Ulti Cannahawk in the perfect scenarios. So that's why I run one of each. The reason I don't run more than one of each is because they need cards to work with, and in a deck as inconsistent as this deck is, that can be a problem. I do run... I would consider running a second Wen, because not only has it the highest attack and the best effect, but because Goldsark is at 3 now, it's actually kind of consistent. Not really consistent, but kind of. So yeah, that's it for the Tamers, and let's get on to the Spiritual Beasts, which are the best of one is Cannahawk, which is still at 3, and this is kind of the pseudo-searcher of the deck. You banish a Ritual Beast card from your deck. That can be a trap card or a spell card or a monster, whether it be a Tamer or a Spiritual Beast. Banish from your deck, and then 2 turns later you get it, no matter what happens to this card. So this card can leave the field, whatever. It's like Goldsark and legs. But the card does need to stay banished. This card banishes needs to stay banished, or else you don't get the add. This means you can use it for rank 4s and whatnot, or fusions or whatever, and still get the add, which is quite good. Then we have 3 Rampengu, and this card is still probably better, one of the second best Spiritual Beast, but it's much weakened by Ulti Cannahawk being at 1, because that means you cannot banish Ulti Cannahawk to send normal Cannahawk to the graveyard for its effect. What its effect is, by the way, is banish a fusion Ritual Beast monster and then send the appropriate or corresponding Spiritual Beast from your deck to the graveyard. This isn't as good as sending it from the deck to the Banished Zone, but it's still quite good. The problem with it is you cannot send Cannahawk to the grave with it, because Ulti Cannahawk's at 1, and if you send Ulti Cannahawk to the Banished Zone without having Fusion summoned it properly first, it means that you kind of lose the duel. Like I said, that's a loss condition. You could cut this down to 2, but I like it just because it's a level 4 Spiritual Beast monster. Next up we have our 2 of Apelio. Apelio is really good for pushing OTKs. He's not only got a 19 or 1800 attack, beefy 1800 attack, but you can banish a Ritual Beast card from your graveyard, and then all Ritual Beasts gain 500 attack for the rest of the turn. This allows it back in the day to get over Winda, but nowadays just allows you to beat over lots of things. You can use the effect multiple times in a turn, and all of your monsters get, you know, stacking damage boost. It's quite crazy. However, unlike Rampengu, it doesn't forward your game state at turn 1 in such a way. That's why I've run this ratio. You could run 2 and 2. I'd never run 3 of this and 2 of Rampengu though. And 1 Petalfin. Petalfin is by far the weakest, having 0 attack and having 2000 defense, which is kind of useless, to be honest. But it's also another name, because we need names. That gives us 4 different spiritual beast names, like 4 different tamer names you have, which allows us to do all our combos. And its effect is banishing a ritual beast card from your hand, and then target 1 card your opponent controls and return it to the hand, which is really quite bad. If I'm being honest. It used to be used to get rid of Decree back when this deck used to run a lot of traps. Spoiler alert, I don't run a lot of traps. And yeah, that's why it's at 1. That's it for the Spiritual Beast cards. And that's quite a lot of them. I think that's 15 in total of the Ritual Beast monster cards. Next up, you have 3 Heroic Challenger Assault Halberd. And you might be going, what the hell, I thought this was Ritual Beast. And believe me, it is. However, like I said, Ulti Kanahawk is at 1 now. Fusion Summoning, while still this deck's main play, is not as good as it used to be, quite honestly. With Emergency Teleport at 1 as well, rather than the 3 it used to be at, you can't really guarantee the Fusion Summon without running into consistent cards, which won't help guarantee the Fusion Summon anyways. So yeah, you might want to be making rank 4s turn 1, and this allows you to do it. First of all, it special summons itself, not consuming your normal summon. It's level 4, and it has a very beneficial searching effect that searches itself. No 3 better cards can be put in. Maybe Dinotherium, but I don't like that card. But no better card can be put in than Heroic Challenger Assault Halberd. Not to mention it can be searched by Rhoda. Definite 3 of. In fact, I consider it kind of staple in this deck. It really does need that consistency and power, and this card offers both. Next up for hand traps, we run 2 Max C. It's at 2 and you can only run 2. This allows you to, you know, stop your opponent from going too crazy and making too big a board turn 1. You'll always want to be going second with this deck, by the way. You need the extra card, and I've built the deck around going second. If you want to make a going first build, you could run tons of traps. I don't think the deck would be very good doing that. You can't really afford to play Ulti Kanahawk into back row. You might as well just scoop if they have a strike. So yeah, also the deck is not consistent enough. Next up we have 2 Veiler. 2 is fine. It gives you 4 hand traps, which are effectively more trap cards that you can utilize when you're going second. And that's it for the monsters. I don't really think I need to explain those hand traps. They're great and they make sense. Now up for spells, we run 3 Space Typhoon. And if you watch my hat profile, you'll know I ran 1 Space Typhoon, and that was only because I could pop my own artifacts if they kind of clogged up. And I also said that I wasn't a fan of Space Typhoon in the main ever. This is an exception. Because of this deck being so fragile, I'll take any cards that I can. I chose not to run Twisters though, because Twisters and discarding cards from your hand is firstly not very good in a combo deck like this, which doesn't generate much hand advantage, but rather field advantage. But not only that, Twin Twisters destroys 2, so if you're playing against a deck like that, it might only set an odd back row, maybe a Vanities or whatnot, or maybe a Floodgate like an anti-spell or whatever, then this card is just straight up better against a single back row. So I chose to run Space over Twin Twister in the main. I might run a couple of Twin Twisters in the side. I don't have a side deck for this deck yet. So yeah, next up we have 3 Gold Sark, and I should mention that one of these is a emergency teleport. You still run the 1 emergency teleport. I don't own emergency teleport. I actually thought I had 2. I checked my binder just before making this video, and no, I don't. So maybe it's in a drawer somewhere, but until then I need to get an emergency teleport. It's like €1 now, and so it'll be 2 Gold Sark, 1 emergency teleport. Next up we have Foolish Burial, which functions similarly. The reason I run Foolish Burial is because it's good in this deck. It's actually still quite good, but also because it can, you know, turn Zephyr Pilica and Lara, I believe it's Lara, into really great plays, which without this card they're not. So yeah, that's it. So 2 Gold Sark, 1 emergency teleport, and 1 Foolish Burial. Next up we have 1 Rhoda, because we're running Assault Halberds. And I perfectly believe Rhoda is worth it, just because of, free search in an inconsistent deck like this, and it's quite good. One Upstart Goblin, of course. Pity it's not a 3. It used to be one of the better cards in Ritual Beast, excuse me. One Regeki, as I said, I like going second with this deck. In fact, I need to go second with this deck. Yeah, just a really generally great card. In this format, dealing with big boards, especially with this deck, really struggles with. It has no real destruction. It has ways to attack over big monsters, like with Ulti Apelio, and that's kind of it, really. It's no other way to deal with them, so this is kind of important. Next up, we have 1 Soul Charge and 1 Instant Fusion. Same as my hat deck. You've only 1 Norden. I don't believe there's a reason to run more than 1 Instant Fusion. You could run a second with the Mavelus in the extra deck, but extra deck space is really quite tight in this deck with the Fusions and the Exceeds and whatnot. So I believe that's important. And a lot of players that used to play Ritual Beasts are going to be asking me, or looking at this and saying, what the hell? Well, there's going to be tons of Banish stuff, but not Grave stuff. Well, there kind of is with this version. You have your Heroic Challenger Assault Halberds, which are, really good, and they're in there. And not to mention that, you'll probably have a Rampengu or a Canahawk, lying that round in the graveyard every so often, especially when you're making your fusion plays and putting them back in the graveyard. Both cards extremely important and extremely worth it, I believe. Then we have one last spell card, which is the searchable Bond, Ritual Beast Bond, which just allows you to fuse, with 2 on your field and make a extra deck fusion, including Ulti Gaiapelio, I believe it's called. Yeah, Ulti Gaiapelio, which is usually only made by having 1 Ulti Fusion, a Tamer, and a Spiritual Beast on the board. So it's quite hard to make. You can just use 2 of them with this card and make it into a 3200 beat stick. It doesn't have an effect, unfortunately. That's it for the spell cards. And lastly, we have our traps, which are 2 Steeds, 2 Ambush, and 1 Emptiness. Emptiness is fantastic, this format. It really allows you to turn, kind of weak boards into stupidly strong ones, especially in a defensive deck like this. Not a lot to say about it other than that. Then you have your 2 Ambush and 2 Steeds. These used to be run at 3 of each, but since I'm playing a more aggressive approach to this deck, going second and not setting up turn 1 for my opponent, I'm setting up my own turn 1 after my opponent already has played a turn. They're not as great, of course, in that case, but also you never really search the 3rd of each. You want the 2nd of each, just in case you want to search the 2nd of each. But the 3rd of each never comes up, and I feel that these ratios are fine. Lets you brick a lot less since you want to search these anyways. And yeah, so that's it for the main deck. I will do the extra deck now and no side deck. Not doing a side deck for this one, although I will tell you Macrocosmos and Dimensional Fissure can go in there. Just make sure that you realize that your hand traps and whatnot won't work with them, and also cards like Soul Charge and Instant Fusion won't work with them either, so be wary on siding those really quite good in this deck cards in, but just, not great with some of the cards that I'm teching or using for this build. For the fusions, we've got our 1 Ulti Canahawk, best card in the deck. Searcher, crazy card, brilliant, amazing, searches traps. Excellent, searches, OTK cards like Bond, and then it searches your monsters too if you want monsters. Great card. Ulti Gaiapelio, this card is like Solemn Warning on legs, and then on steroids, and then on cocaine too. This card is crazy powerful, super strong. However, it's kind of difficult to make it, especially in the current, build of this deck with, less emergency teleports and Ulti Canahawks. That really hurts making this card. I run the 2 anyways, simply and the reason you run 2 of every of the Ulti fusions except for Canahawk, because it's at 1, is because you can set them with Rampengu. Just so you know, the reason you need the second is 1 to summon, 1 to get with Rampengu. 2 Ulti Petalfin, same deal. This card cannot be destroyed, so it's very defensive. So 1 is just for getting the Petalfin into the graveyard, and the other is, to summon occasionally. It's actually quite a good card to summon turn 1 if you don't open great. If you open okay or average, it allows you to play a bit defensively. It's kind of hard to get over 2800 defense monster that can't be destroyed, especially when it can detag itself. And then you have your 2 Ulti Apelio. Ulti Apelio is aggressive. Your opponent, it's unaffected by card effects when it attacks, which is great. You can ignore your opponent's effects, you can ignore all that shit. However, it means it's also unaffected by your own, which means it doesn't get the 500 boost from the standard Apelio, which is really poor card design actually. But I won't harp on too much about that. You run 2 of that as well. 1 Nodin, simply because you're running the Instant Fusion. And sorry about the mismatched colour sleeves, I just wasn't de-sleeving cards for the extra deck. One Chidori, it's pretty much the best rank 4 that you can run, but it unfortunately requires 2 wind monsters, and you run a lot of wind monsters. However, Heroic Challenger Assault Halberd, which is used in most of your rank 4 plays, is not a wind monster, and therefore, you know, it needs a Rampengi plus Canok, or 2 of either of those cards, to, you know, be made. 1 Castell, pretty much generic good stuff for removal, and same with Diamond Direwolf, except Diamond Direwolf can also get set cards too, so you run 1 of each. Then we run our Emerald, which is actually quite important in this deck, simply because Heroic Challenger Assault Halberd loves this card. They're husband and wife, with Emerald probably being the wife. Yeah, just a great card in general. Allows you to shuffle stuff back, which is great. Hand traps too, I guess. 1 Abyss Dweller, because, you know, BAPK exists, Mermails exist. It's just a decent staply rank 4. Then we have the 1 rank 3 and 1 rank 2, in case you ever make them off a Soul Charge play. I don't know if you would often, however, I kind of figured that the option to make a rank 3 or rank 2 outweighed the ability to run a less staply rank 4. So I think that worked out, and I think these are good for the 14th and 15th spot. Levear especially, which is actually amazing in this deck when you can summon it. Sky Cavalry, it's just because it's the best rank 2 that I could find that was kind of generic and good to use. And yeah, that brings us to the end of this deck profile. I hope you enjoyed the deck profile. If you liked the video, you know, click that like button. If you want to see more of this quite regularly uploaded content, you can subscribe. And I don't think I have anything else to say. So guys, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.